Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this June 6th, 2017 day on our calendar. My guest today is International Attorney Jon Levy, and what a story Jon has today. These the people that are trying to silence any kind of Vatican collusion in anything and go to extremes, they're even trying to hijack some of Jon's clients. I've never seen anything like it, and if you listeners don't understand, Jon filed a case over a decade ago called Alperin v. Vatican Bank, which was a case that really showed information that the Vatican was involved in the genocide of Croatia. And it's an interesting story, and the evidence was overwhelming, but the case was dismissed in the Ninth Circuit, or call it the Ninth Circus, on technical grounds. Jon, explain this whole story. First, give us an overview of Alperin v. Vatican Bank, where that led you, and now what's going on.
Right. Thanks, Greg. Good to be with you.
Okay.
Alperin versus Vatican Bank is a very important case. It was a class action filed way back in 1999 against the Vatican regarding some genocide that took place in Yugoslavia during the Second World War, and more specifically about what happened to somewhere around $250 million worth of loot that was stolen from there and laundered through the Vatican Bank with the connivance of some elements of British and American intelligence. And the problem here is it then backs into what I think some of the listeners may have heard about called the rat lines, which was the CIA and British operation to move former Nazis over to South America and finance some of these fascist organizations as anti-communist groups. So it's a big lawsuit, and it proceeded for quite a while in the federal courts, despite the obviously non-cooperation of the U.S. government. And we did sue the CIA and the U.S. Army to get their intelligence files. And a former U.S. Army counterintelligence agent, William Gowen, testified for 4 days. He was an eyewitness way back in 1947 to the rat lines and how this money stolen from victims of genocide in Yugoslavia was being used. And then eventually we were tossed out of the U.S. court system. They told us, go somewhere else with your lawsuit. We took it over to the European Union and went through their process because the Vatican is now part of the Euro system. If you've ever been to Rome, you know they hawk those Vatican euros there. So the Vatican did sign a treaty, anti-money laundering treaty, to get into the Euro system. But eventually the European Union told us to go chase the Vatican at the Vatican. So we filed a canon law petition with the Pope. And that was just recently, so we're waiting to see what results from that, if anything. But lo and behold, what do I find out? Some attorney in Chicago, a well-connected attorney, filed a class action lawsuit using my information and my clients and filed it in federal court in Chicago against Croatia, not referencing any rat lines or the Vatican at all, and somehow, Greg, got the U.S. State Department, who never would lift a finger to help me, to serve the lawsuit on the Republic of Croatia.
Wow, boy. And did they use your clients too?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a case of identity theft. This is what's amazing. And it's a senior attorney who has been around for a long time, former law professor, took the names in the pleadings from the old Alperin case, took 7 of the plaintiffs' names and pleadings. Now, 3 of the plaintiffs were alive. 4 of them were dead. He used dead people. The 3 who are alive have asked me to get the darn thing dismissed. And 2 of them have written letters to the judge saying this is identity theft, they're being scammed, and the federal judge doesn't do anything.
So, did you ever? What did the professor or the attorney say? Did he have the people who filed this case? What did they say?
Well, they accused me, and they sought sanctions against me. A sanction being they asked the court to punish me for interfering with their lawsuit because I was supposedly an agent of the Republic of Croatia. So they tried to have me punished. They threatened one of my clients. In fact, they tried to call up when the Croatian government finally answered the lawsuit just last week. They called up one of my plaintiffs and threatened her. If she wouldn't sign off on the fraud, they claimed they would sue her. And all sorts of
a question I have to ask, did these attorneys who filed the case ever have contact with your clients?
One of the attorneys, the law professor, worked for us at the very, very end. I don't want to name his name here because he's a litigious fellow, so I don't want to get you sued.
Okay.
But at the very end of our Alperin case, he helped us with a U.S. Supreme Court petition just in kind of an auxiliary fashion. So that's where he became acquainted with the case. And a very well-known authority in international law, I might add. But one, I think, connected to groups that are trying to, even now, scuttle the rat line lawsuits and claims by filing a false lawsuit.
Right. Well, you know, and just for my listeners, the clients are really the last authority, the first authority in the case, and a client can dismiss his attorney. Have your clients said to you they don't want to go along with this case?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. You're correct on one count, that you can't have a lawsuit without clients. That's right. You
Right.
gotta have a plaintiff, right? We learned that first day in law school.
Right.
But they can't dismiss the guy because he's not their attorney. All he did was steal their names and identities. So if you dismiss him, you're saying he was your attorney, right?
Right.
So they've written to the court saying they've been the victim of fraud and identity theft, and the federal judge, Judge Afonso, an Obama appointee, doesn't seem to take, they file the letters, and you think any judge with half of any scruples would be asking this attorney, why am I getting letters from your plaintiffs accusing you of identity theft?
Yes, and there's more to there's false representation, there's filing a frivolous lawsuit without any, there's a whole battery of charges here.
Right, so it goes back to why would the State Department get involved in suing the Republic of Croatia? Now, and also, why would this guy be throwing around the Clintons' name? When he threatened my client, he said, "Don't you know I'm connected to the Clintons?"
That's like saying, "Did you see what happened to Seth Rich?"
Yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you, they'll go to all extremes. This takes the cake, though. But just to give our listeners some kind of basis in historical fact here, it doesn't surprise me because in this lawsuit, there's no mention of the Vatican, so they're trying to shift the blame to Croatia and say the Vatican had nothing. They don't even mention them. But go back to the beginning. The Vatican has been protected from the beginning in this case. So if you could explain to us some of the hurdles and some of the protections our government, the courts, and now even the State Department go to great lengths to protect the Vatican, maybe it gives people an idea that when I talk about some things that I only can use circumstantial evidence against the Vatican or historical fact, I think this case brings to mind that what we're talking about here, about the Vatican-led New World Order, and they are probably at the top of the whole scheme, this gives it more validity. So maybe you could tell our listeners the stumbling blocks that you've had along this long 10-year, 15-year journey of trying to get to some truth. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. Why is the U.S. government and State Department and courts protecting the Vatican? We were among the first to sue the Vatican, maybe the first to sue them on a class action. And the Vatican was when we sent them the lawsuit to the Vatican Bank, they were so shook up that they the president of the Vatican Bank at that time, Angelo Colloia himself, took out his red pen, took a copy of the lawsuit, marked it up, and with some things on there saying this is not true, and wrote a letter personally to us saying, take back your lawsuit. So that's how we got him served. Even a federal court couldn't deny that he had accepted service. Otherwise, I would have to tell you, it would have been virtually impossible, because there was no mechanism at that time to really serve the Vatican, because you couldn't just mail them things. But by his actions, he got served. Now, since then, a number of people have tried to sue the Vatican, some for very good reasons, as you know.
Yeah.
And it's been hushed up by the current Pope. It's still going on. The sexual abuse of children, by the phenomenal claims that are still being sorted out regarding the Vatican, and certainly proof that the former Pope, Benedict, helped craft the policy to cover up sexual abuse of children and crimes against children by their priests. They were sued over that. There was a banking case, the Martin Frankel case down in Mississippi, where the proceeds of 7 insurance companies have been looted in the United States, have been laundered through the Vatican Bank. That one just sort of shriveled up and disappeared, even though it was filed by 7 state insurance commissioners against the Vatican Bank. All these lawsuits have been pushed aside by the courts or made to disappear, and largely because of non-cooperation by the U.S. State Department. The State Department, instead of coming in there and helping to get these things settled on behalf of U.S. citizens like they should, have been busy, no matter who is in charge of the U.S. government, busy obfuscating and trying to prevent lawsuits from going forward. In fact, if you go into WikiLeaks, search up the Vatican file, you'll find some of the truth about what the State Department does, what our U.S. Embassy at the Vatican does, which is mainly cover up for the Vatican.
Yeah, exactly. And even going back to Alperin, when you had that in the Ninth Circuit, I found it amazing that after almost a decade, the court didn't even want to hear the merits of the case. They just said the Vatican Bank doesn't do business here. What a farce.
Yeah, it's a lie. First of all, the Vatican, there's numerous people in the U.S., archdioceses and the like, who have accounts at the Vatican Bank. So how can you say they don't do business in the United States, right? It was just totally stage managed by the State Department. So then, when we see the State Department quietly helping a lawsuit using the same facts going against Croatia, which we never sued, because we knew you couldn't sue Croatia because it was not the successor state to any country in the Second War.
Right.
It was the successor state to the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. You couldn't sue them. So we got this guy suing under a faulty legal premise. Either he was trying to get dismissed on purpose so he could set a precedent. That's one thought, because he never could have succeeded. Or, Greg, there was money laundering involved. Now, a lot of people would say, "What?
Explain that to me. I don't get that one. Go ahead."
Well, how could you launder money using a lawsuit, right? A fake lawsuit. Well, think about it. You file a lawsuit, and you have a federal judge who's looking in the other direction, like this one is. So you go and you cook something up with the defendant to transfer $250 million or something, right?
Right.
And you do it under the guise of a settlement in federal court. Now, believe it or not, the federal court doesn't necessarily have to approve that settlement at that stage of the game. It may say, "Oh, okay, fine, you guys have settled, I don't need to see it, just go ahead and do it," right? Or they just put some very sketchy stuff on the record and dismissed.
Wow.
Now, what use would that be? You got to ask yourself. Well, let's just say maybe the State Department has money that they sent to Croatia, needs to get it back in the U.S. Lawsuits are a way to do it, especially a large sum of money. This lawsuit that was filed using my plaintiff's name was for $3.5 billion.
Oh, man.
That's a lot of money. That raised some eyebrows if I was the judge. Wouldn't that judge want to monitor this lawsuit?
Here's a question I got to ask. Who's going to defend this case now? Who's there in Croatia to defend this case?
Well, that's a great question, because last week we got notice the Croatians hired counsel. Who did they hire, Greg, but the people who represented the Vatican Bank and the Franciscans? In our lawsuit, we sued the Franciscan order in the Vatican Bank because the Franciscans were charged with financing part of the rat lines as well.
Could they be controlling both sides of this fake suit?
Well, it would appear that way. It would appear that way. The Croatian's attorney wasn't all that interested in what I had to say. The first thing he did was to file a motion to get more time, you see, till September 1st.
You think that if they're really defending it for real, they would want your evidence, they would want everything from you to get the case dismissed. They would work with you.
Right. Well, they may have to do it now that they've been unmasked. But, I mean, again, it is, and it's taking place in Chicago of all places, which was the epicenter of the funding of various Croatian fascist groups after the Second World War. So it's taking place right there in their own backyard, just by coincidence.
Yeah, I was wondering why Chicago,
Yeah, Chicago was where the Croatian liberation movement in exile, which was the continuation of the Second World War puppet government of Croatia, went after the Second War, funded by money from the rat lines, which is the money we're suing for.
So you think they could get a fake defense, get a settlement, and the money comes over, and that's the way they get their money, huh?
Well, it could be, yes. I mean, because let's face it, the rat line lawsuit showed that the U.S. government needed to move money, and one way they moved it in the past was through the Vatican Bank. Now they could maybe use this lawsuit to move money. And why do I say that? Well, you're an expert on this. What did the CIA use the Vatican Bank for, Greg?
Exactly, money laundering, right?
Money laundering. Who paid for all the money that was sent over to Poland to fund the groups over there like Walesa, and all
exactly.
The rest of them?
I mean, that's going on today, probably with ISIS, to be frank.
Well, that funding Ukrainian fascists over in Ukraine and all manner of things are done through the Vatican Bank or have been in the past. So when you see the information from the Vatican Bank lawsuit being hijacked for a $3.5 billion lawsuit that doesn't make any sense, filed in Chicago, served by the State Department, who's more than happy to oblige them, served on the Croatian government. Now, why would the U.S. want to do something to the Croatian government? The Croatian government is an ally in NATO, a key ally. So why would the State Department be hustling a lawsuit over there?
And not one word about the Vatican in this case?
No, not one word about the Vatican or the rat lines.
Well, to me it has a lot, if you're looking at it from their point of view, first discredit you, then secondly, get a fake settlement that shows that your case was totally bogus, right?
That could be part of it. Get that thrown out, but also I think the money. Follow the money. Nobody does this thing for free, and it's very risky stealing people's identities. In fact, the thing sort of leaked out. The lawsuit was filed way back in May of 2016, and it only leaked out into the Croatian press in March of this year when it was served. And I think that was a mistake. I think they didn't want anyone to know about it.
Has this case got any traction anywhere else outside of Croatia, maybe in Europe?
No. We contacted, strangely enough, the legal press in Chicago. And nobody was interested. Nobody's interested in a $3.5 billion lawsuit against a foreign government with 4 dead plaintiffs and 3 stolen identities served by the State Department.
Well, how do they get away with the dead guys? What are they going to do there?
Nothing. I mean, they're dead. One of them died in 2001, God rest. They're my former clients.
Now
One of them's 97 years old if he was alive, which I don't think he is because I haven't heard from him in years. And 2 of them, the other ones I've got obituaries on. And I've sent those into the court to the chief judge in the Northern District of Illinois.
And nothing.
Nothing. I mean, you can't use, just to your listeners, you can't use dead people to file lawsuits. Otherwise, us attorneys would be running around filing lawsuits on behalf of Abraham Lincoln or whoever, right? It's like you can't do it. They're dead. Dead is dead. You maybe can sometimes represent somebody's estate, but that's not what this lawsuit says.
Now, I may have missed this I may have missed this in the beginning, but is this a law firm or a solo practitioner?
Solo practitioner, although he has had several law firms moving in and out of the lawsuit here. So there's been some lawsuits or law firms, but they seem to withdraw quickly.
Now, I don't put anything past these guys, but anyway, you said he was involved in the beginning of Alperin v. Vatican Bank. Do you think he might have been a plant from the beginning?
Well, no, at the very end. He was involved at the very end.
Okay, at the very end. Well, same question.
I've looked into the guy's background, and on the same day he filed the lawsuit against Croatia, May 31st, 2016, he filed a similar billion-dollar lawsuit against the Republic of Hungary.
Huh. And what was that about?
Well, to me it looked like I went and did a little work, investigative work, and he had been on, just like with Alperin, he had been affiliated with but kicked off of a banking lawsuit, trying a Holocaust banking lawsuit. And looked to me like he just copied those people's names from another lawsuit.
So he's
This gets interesting, but that was the Chicago deal. So when I contacted the other attorney who'd been on that lawsuit, he was like, surprised, but I don't think he was going to do anything. So I'm wondering, why is that? Wouldn't you be upset someone stole your plaintiffs?
He didn't do it, and he didn't care.
Didn't seem to care. And this fellow also, the one that's filing the false lawsuits, had been on another class action in Illinois that had been hushed up. I only found out about it by chance, where, again, on behalf of Serbs, they sued some U.S. military contractors for allegedly committing crimes in the Balkans recently, during the 90s. And I thought, and they settled out of court for several $1 million, although it's unspecified because it was a hushed-up settlement. And I don't know what happened to the money in that one. And maybe that was a test run. Since when do U.S. military contractors working for NATO settle lawsuits for things done against Serbs? Never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, and this guy it's kind of interesting that he must have high-level protection somewhere, because no attorney in their right mind would want to file this case like that. I mean, stealing names, come on, that's disbarment immediately, correct?
Yeah, right. Well, does the guy even exist, you wonder? He doesn't appear in court, claims he's 80 years old and in a wheelchair.
Okay, have you tried to talk to him personally?
No, because he'll just cuss me out. I have talked to the people who work for him,
right? And
they were singularly uncommunicative.
Right. Now, do you have affidavit? You going to get affidavits from your clients, or how's?
We do. We have two on file with the court. I can read one for you.
Why don't we do this? We got about a minute and a half here. Why don't we read that at the next half hour and just finish up here with this guy? It's for the life of me, I think you're right when it comes to the money, because, they've got pretty well the courts and the media silence. So, you know what? The Alperin v. Vatican Bank was a big case, and it's really sad that where do you have to go to get it out on the Internet, and then it appears to be, they'll just call it a conspiracy theory, a bogus case. So it appears they must have some really financial gains to get off of this case, don't you think?
Absolutely. I don't think it's just to get a corrupt verdict on it.
No, they can silence this Alperin v. Vatican Bank story in the media quickly, and they have to have an ulterior financial motive here. And then, they killed two birds with one stone. Then they not only discredit your case, they get all their money, and they walk away happy, right?
Right.
Wow. I tell you, it sounds like they've bought off most people in this case so far, on both sides. I think they're controlling both sides of this case. And
it looks that way to me, and the judge. But
and the
bar associations who I've complained to.
All right. Listen, John, we're all out of time in this half hour. Let's come back and delve into this a little bit more with Jon Levy. What an interesting story. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour. My guest is Jon Levy, and what an interesting, this is a very, very complex but disturbing story of how his lawsuit's been stolen. His clients have been stolen, and the courts are protecting this case. It's an amazing story. Jon, you got your clients coming on the record stating they're not involved in this case. You wanted to read one of their affidavits?
Yeah, I'll just read a little bit. But this affidavit was filed June 1st, 2007, United States District Court, Northern District of Illinois. right? It says, Dear Judge Alonzo, I believe you are now aware that the plaintiffs in Lalic versus Croatia, gave the name of the lawsuit, but that's public, are either deceased or, like myself, victims of identity theft by Mr. So-and-so. Will you please use your judicial powers and dismiss this frivolous and factually impossible lawsuit because there are no plaintiffs and therefore no lawsuit? On May 26, 2017, this attorney, I have his name in there, contacted me and attempted to get me to sign up as a plaintiff for this lawsuit by promising me a big monetary payoff. He claimed my current attorney, Mr. Levy, was an agent for the Republic of Croatia, but Mr. Levy had already warned me about the false lawsuit, and that he and another gentleman whose identity had also been stolen were attempting to get you to dismiss. This attorney, the name redacted there, has stolen my identity for this lawsuit. I told him in no uncertain terms what I thought of him. He then threatened to sue me. And I have the texts and emails to prove his contact, attempts to induce me to ratify his fraud. I have the emails that prove his attempt to induce me to ratify his fraud on the court. He is a menace to the legal system. I do not understand why you are permitting him to continue to file false claims in the names of people he does not represent, even after you have been put on notice of his actions. I want to make it very clear, I am not suing Croatia. I have not authorized this person to sue Croatia, and I have no idea who he was until earlier this week. Respectfully yours, plaintiff. Right? So-called plaintiff.
Wow, that's rich. He wants to sue a client he doesn't even, he steals their identity, then he wants to sue the client that isn't even his.
Yeah, well, the client told him he was a no-good weasel, and then he threatened to sue the client.
Oh, God. And so this was sent to the judge, no response.
No response, and there was a similar one that was filed a month earlier by another fellow, who was even more steamed up about it because he'd received threats to his life from, pissed off Croatians.
My God. And so now, what can you do, John? I mean, this is a tough case. You're kind of like caught in a pickle. Well, what can happen here? Is there any kind of justice you can see happen in this case?
Well, I mean, what should happen is that when the judge was, and I filed complaints. I filed complaints with the chief judge in that district. I filed complaints with the Illinois and New York Bar Associations, who conveniently have lost the complaints. The chief judge, who's in charge of, keeping order in his court, they don't appear to be doing anything either. And the court itself has been notified by me and by these two plaintiffs so far. And what should be happening is that long ago, the judge should have issued an order to this attorney saying, please explain why people are saying you don't represent the plaintiffs. Can you show you represent them?
Right, and nothing. They're just letting it move forward. Now, has the defense filed any papers yet?
Yes, the defense came in and asked for 90 days
to
formulate their response.
All right.
Which is, I think, worrisome as well. Why would we need this dragging on for 90 more days?
You'd think the defense would have said, basically, used a lot of the information that you have and state this is a frivolous case. The attorney is not representing these clients, and let's have this dismissed immediately.
Well, the Croatian government's been aware of the fraud for at least 60 days because we notified them too.
And they're not doing anything, right?
No, well, they hired attorneys, but it's like everyone's very reluctant to do anything, and I don't understand that. Judges have never been reluctant to come after me. Let me tell you, Greg, I've never seen this sort of restraint before. If they think an attorney is stepping out of line, and here we got allegations of criminal fraud.
Yeah, that's true. And so, you think there's any friendly faces in the Croatian government, or are these people on there basically been notified what's really going on?
Well, I don't think I'm on their good list, the Croatian government, but no, I really just think it's a real puzzler that something here is not right. Someone is using the courts for a corrupt purpose, and the fact the State Department is so willing to get involved and serve a NATO ally with a frivolous lawsuit just has me wondering what's going on here. I've never heard of the State Department serving lawsuits for anyone.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't know about that, but take your word for it. So they get involved. Boy, this is an interesting.
Well, I mean, think about it. When the plaintiff's attorney is supposed to serve the lawsuit. Since when does the State Department deliver lawsuits?
Exactly. Exactly.
And whose do they deliver every? I know that for a fact they don't deliver everybody's private lawsuit against a foreign government. That's not a service that I think they provide. So that somebody makes that decision.
Any other things you found strange in this case, as far as the guy who filed it? Anything else that that sends up some alarms?
Well, I think it's alarming. I am concerned about the current state of affairs with the Vatican. This could be something the Vatican itself cooked up. They're very, very sly, and they do like to try to tie up their loose ends if they can. What better way to get me off their back than to have some kind of quote-unquote settlement or dismissal involving these claims with Croatia?
Now, this is nothing new. You said now the attorneys that handle this case are the Franciscan attorneys. You've had run-ins with them in the past. Explain.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we sued the Vatican Bank, we also sued the Franciscan Order because the Franciscans were in charge of running the rat lines. They were the foot soldiers of the Vatican Bank, and we thought we had a really good case against them because we even traced the people who were running the rat line again being the way the U.S. and British intelligence moved ex-Nazis to South America and elsewhere. We traced one of the people, one of the main people, Father Dominic Mandich, who was the treasurer of the rat line, to Chicago, where he ended his years at St. Anthony's Monastery there, or friary. And we sued that friary, we sued the Franciscans, and these attorneys were tough attorneys. They didn't give us anything but a lot of grief during that lawsuit. So very interesting that the Croatian government would hire them.
And it's did you want to recount that story?
Well, I've had a personal run-in. One of these guys is a great big Croatian fella, and we were doing a deposition of William Gowen in Dallas about 10 years ago now, and Gowen was in his 80s then. He's still alive, and we got into a little bit of a tussle there. I thought the big guy was going to come over the table after me. But luckily, it was one of those classic law offices where the table was gigantic, so he couldn't reach over that table if he tried. But they were tough opponents, and while they're familiar with the matter, I do find it rather suspicious they would go with that law firm.
I would too. I mean, that's basically you think Croatia would look for somebody that would be on their side, so to speak.
Well, there is a question that if you want to avoid liability, why would you associate yourself with the attorneys who represented people involved with the rat lines? I mean, maybe the Franciscan. Well, we always alleged, of course, the Croatian government did have some involvement, but we could never prove it, and we could never sue them because under international law you just couldn't. But it certainly seems to show that they were connected indeed with the Franciscans if they're using the same attorneys.
One question I failed to ask is anything interesting in the complaint?
No, there's not really anything interesting in the complaint. It's just a mishmash of some atrocities that were committed during the Second World War in Croatia.
Uh-huh.
And then just a demand for money, and then he's also demanding $1 million a day until they settle or something like that. It's just the amount of money demanded, $3.5 billion, should raise eyebrows. The courts should be, somewhat wary of these type of lawsuits. If you're going to come into court, create a diplomatic incident.
Exactly, but there was no specifics as far as, like in your case, you had exact specific evidence showing that these people and the Vatican were involved in this genocide and also stealing of the loot. Were there any specific people mentioned in that case?
Well, no, just the information about my plaintiffs that he stole from the previous pleadings in Alperin. So it was
he just hijacked
the
your
information and then said the Croatians are responsible.
I wonder if he didn't even, maybe he had somebody else write it for him.
It's very possible. Like I said, whoever did it didn't even bother to see if anyone was dead or alive. I mean, one of the so-called plaintiffs was born in 1922.
Right,
okay?
yeah.
So you would at least maybe want to see if the guy was alive. Now, I haven't heard from the poor guy since 2001. So while he might have been alive during our lawsuit, he probably, unfortunately, has passed on since then, because he would be, 1922, he'd be, 96 years old. Well, there's people who are 96, but I kind of doubt that this guy signed up for this lawsuit. I kind of doubt he's alive. But so nobody even bothered to check out this sort of thing. Nobody bothered to sign up a single plaintiff, which leads me to believe the lawsuit was never supposed to see the light of day.
Exactly. This is going to be a bunch of money settled out of court. You get your case. They get a good counterattack on your case. But anyway, where is the case now against the Vatican on this? Well,
there was one other point that I don't think they counted on, and
okay.
They didn't count on Trump winning the election.
Right.
And I think what happened here is this got leaked out to the press because, Clinton was not in the White House. Clinton had been in the White House. This would have been handled, but I think under Tillerson, the state, they are trying to purge out some of this deep state people, and maybe someone did the right thing here and blew the whistle on an Obama operation.
Huh. Boy, I tell you, the next step would be to try to get as much publicity, get it out there as much as you can. I would also think maybe the Italian press would be willing to look at this, Yeah, or the State Department Inspector General. I just was hoping to get a little traction out of the court, but it looks like grudgingly they have filed these plaintiff affidavits, but nothing else is going to happen. So, we'll probably try to contact the State Department Inspector General and see why they got themselves entangled in this. And what about the Bar Association?
Well, there's two bar associations potentially involved, Illinois and New York, where this attorney is licensed, and both of them didn't. The New York people seem to have lost the complaint, disappeared, and the Illinois people kind of said, "Well, we don't have jurisdiction," even though it's in an Illinois court.
Federal court. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a federal, and of course we complained to the misconduct committee of the federal court, who would have primary jurisdiction, but again, they seem they're just so laid back, Greg. They don't seem concerned.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, look, John, I've got about 10 minutes left. Maybe we could switch gears here a bit.
Right.
And what else is going on? I know you're taking on some interesting cases overseas. Fill me in.
Yeah, we've got some other cases cooking along here. I mean, one big one that we just are still working on is the lawsuit against UBS, which is the big Swiss bank, which was the merger between Swiss National Bank and United Bank of Switzerland.
Wasn't that some case where Clinton got, when she was Secretary of State, she got some special favors for that bank?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, Clinton was involved with UBS. UBS is a convicted felon. They were convicted of committing numerous felonies in the United States, by the way. Tax evasion, fixing prices of, the LIBOR, which is the interest rate price in London, tax evasion, something else. I mean, they've been just nailed over and over, but yet they're too big to fail. They're on the too big to fail bank list, like Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
The banks can commit numerous felonies and nothing much happens to them, but they're in that category of bank. They're connected with Clinton. Clinton did make some kind of deal with them as well, which helped them avoid prosecution for a while. So
then there were some donations made or speeches.
That's right.
Given to the Clinton Foundation or to Clinton, Bill Clinton, during the time she was Secretary of State. Why these things never get brought up in Congress is a.
Well, we don't want to investigate stuff like that. We investigate Russians, Greg. We're going to investigate banks. Right? Maybe a Russian bank, but not a Swiss bank. Oh my gosh, no! Just because they've they're a felon on probation. Well, that doesn't mean anything. But in the case of this bank, we're representing some groups out of Indonesia, which is part of a larger pattern of billions and trillions of dollars of theft. Because, just to sketch it out here, prior to the 1990s, prior to 9/11, these Swiss banks used to go out and solicit what are now called politically exposed persons. So they would go to Mr. Idi Amin down in Uganda and say, "Got any business for us?" Right?
Right.
All the dictators and governments in the world would stash their money at the Swiss National Bank or Union Bank of Switzerland, which were the two predecessors of UBS. They merged and formed UBS. So now what do you think would happen? Say Haile Selassie, all these people, they had accounts in Switzerland, and certainly a huge amount of money out of the Suharto people in Indonesia. People fail to understand. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. It's got, 250 million people? And incredible wealth and gold and oil has come out of there. So huge amounts of corruption, huge amounts of money, which back then, pre-9/11, was perfectly fine if you were a government official to bank at a Swiss bank. Now, what do you think happened to all that money, Greg?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, you can't spend it. I mean, let's say you're Sukarno. Well, he gets locked up or put
Right.
on house arrest. Or Idi Amin, he has to run into exile, and life gets a little difficult, or any of these people, eventually they can't spend it. They can't spend their billions. It's kind of hard to spend, so it just kind of sits there. And then the dictator dies, or ex-dictator.
Right. Then where does it go?
Well, where does it go? That's the question. Okay, they could, because these were people who could steal literally billions of dollars, and or whatever, or take bribes from the CIA or whatever they did. In the case of Indonesia, the CIA gave them lots of money through ITT. Remember them?
Right.
International Telephone and Telegraph. So, and it's well documented. So where did the money go? Well, it went to Switzerland, and we're representing some of the heirs of some of these Indonesian political officials, saying, "Well, where's our money? We've got receipts for billions of dollars. Give it back." And of course, the answer they got back from UBS was, "Well, yes, we may have had these accounts, but 10 years has passed, and we've erased all evidence of them."
Oh, jeez.
So where did the money go? Where did these billions of dollars that passed out of these third world countries go to?
And they never. And the banking records, I guess, are like the Vatican Bank records. They're pretty.
Well, they don't exist, you see. According to UBS, you see, when these two other banks merged, they didn't keep these records. Greg, why would they keep banking records? Under Swiss law, you don't keep records more than 10 years. That's what the Vatican Bank told us to. And, of course, the Swiss, have been caught shredding documents before. That's why they lost in fact, UBS lost the Holocaust banking lawsuit because someone blew the whistle on them while they were saying, "We have no records from the Holocaust." What do you mean we stole people's money who were killed in concentration camps and had accounts with them? We don't have any records, and then somebody was caught shredding the documents.
Wow. So what's your ultimate goal here in this case?
Well, we would like them to account for where all this money went. I mean, these are fabulous sums of money from around the world, and from big and little people who had accounts at Swiss banks. And, if you don't claim your money after 10 years, what happened to it? Well, if it's a little amount, maybe it's put in some sort of list that you can access. But if it's huge money, they just don't report it. And certainly if it was pre-2000, pre-1995, there's no records of it. They've made them disappear.
Wow. And I'm sure that's going to be bottled up in what court would you file that in?
Well, we did file it in the federal court, and they threw us out again on some jurisdictional nonsense. The Supreme Court under Obama had changed the law, saying just because UBS has federally chartered branches all over the U.S.,
right,
you can't sue them in the U.S. You can only sue, the Obama Supreme Court decided that you can only sue a foreign corporation where it has its headquarters, not where it does its business.
Boy, that doesn't sound right. I mean, every case in law school seemed to be the opposite, right?
Yeah, well, they changed the entire fabric of law, just like they did with several other things. So they, for whatever reason, probably having to do with these sort of cases, you no longer, even if you're a big foreign corporation, you can't be sued in the U.S. For something that you've done globally, even though you're operating in the U.S.
Well, that sounds like protection at the highest levels, huh?
Yeah, it certainly stands the former notions of, general jurisdiction on its head, but that's why we got tossed out. We had a good argument, which was, well, wait a minute, UBS is a felon on probation. Doesn't that count? They're on probation in Connecticut. Doesn't that make them a resident of the U.S.? No. UBS is a too-big-to-fail bank that has to file special reports with the Treasury Department every year. Doesn't that mean something? No. UBS has federally chartered bank branches, for God's sakes, and state-chartered one. Doesn't that mean they're in the U.S.? No. Can't sue them. So we're now pursuing it through the Swiss administrative system, but, the Swiss have a tremendous temptation to cover it up.
It's interesting, but, we only have a couple minutes, but just to make a comment, this is really disturbing, and it should be disturbing to the American people as well, because here we have a case where you call out both the press and our court system, which are supposed to be fair, open-minded, and present the most important stories before the American people. And this story, to me, is more important than listening to what the Russians are doing in the Trump administration, which seems to take up every minute of the mainstream media. And it's really sad because I started out as a journalist. There is no journalism anymore. And what secondly is sad for me as a former law student is to see the corruption in our court system. This is, I think I chose two pretty interesting professions, but none of it has to do with really helping the people of the United States, correct?
Well, journalism certainly can help. The courts, I would have to say, it's very difficult to get anything through there anymore. I mean, look, the president himself can't get through his own legislation or an executive order on the travel ban. And the reason is not because the travel ban is unconstitutional, but because the court goes and says, well, you said you didn't like Muslims during the campaign, therefore anything you want to do to a Muslim is unconstitutional.
I know, it's ridiculous.
That's the kind of crazy reasoning coming out of courts. I mean, what is that about? So we're going to let all these people into the country, even though we know it's not the right thing to do because the president may not like Muslims, and therefore it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And I always say the higher you go up in the justice system, the more corruption there is. And I think your cases illustrate that. John, I want to thank you for coming on. We only have a few seconds. And people, go to some of my past stories and past shows with John over the years and look up Alperin v. Vatican Bank. You'll find some interesting information regarding the Vatican connection to many, many things we talk about on this show. John, I want to thank you again, and let's keep in touch, and we'll have you on again in a couple of weeks, okay?
Yeah, my pleasure, Greg.
Okay, that was Jon Levy. We're all out of time. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.